were you going to be a rock and roll band?
No, we were going to. The last thing I wanted to do was be a box boy in a grocery store, which is what everybody did to make money, to put gas in their cars if they had a car. This is like when you're 15, you're 16 years old. It just so happened the Beatles came out then. To me, I had no singing experience. The guys that I hung out with were all. I was a track runner. I was a miler, 2-miler, and that's my whole life was distance running. But it was an extreme. I was an extremist at all times. If I was a distance runner, I would practiced all day for that. That's what carried over into the career after a while. I realized everybody in the band was a track member. It's the weirdest thing. This band was made up of athletes. Alice Cooper, the sickest band in America. We're all at 4-year Letterman. People never knew that. These guys, we'd rehearse at night. We'd play the Beatles songs because that was the easiest thing, that we wanted. And of course, it attracted girls. We never really expected to make more than $20 a night playing at parties, and it made us a little bit special from the other guys. And on top of it, it was the kind of thing where nobody really took it seriously at the time. In fact, our first show was a Letterman's Club talent show where we wore Beatle wigs. We wore our track uniforms, and we hired girls to scream for us in the cafeteria. And we got so high from the idea that we learned 2 songs. And that people were screaming. And even though we paid them, it was such a buzz that we said, we could probably learn a couple more songs and play, half an hour maybe at a place. And that's what we just kept learning the songs. And finally it ended up with that original band was the original. Oh, no, it wasn't the original Alice Cooper band. We were together 7 years before we even met Zappa. A lot of people don't realize that, but we were together since '64.
But you were just a rock and roll band. You just played
We played
songs.
Beatles. We played anything that we could learn to play at any bar that we could play at. And in Arizona, that was dangerous, too, because the hair this long would draw every drunk cowboy in town in 1964, 65. We'd come out and, the aerials would be bent on the cars and everything. And these cowboys, girls liked the long hair, which was dangerous,
More dangerous.
But the band originally started out, that's how we actually started out. And it ended up that, we just kept it going. Through college, we were all in college together. And
around
the Phoenix in Arizona, yeah. And then we decided we'd go to Los Angeles, and somehow I met one of the girls from the GTOs, who was on Straight Records, and she introduced me to Frank Zappa.
But at what point did this become what it became? Did you stop being just a rock and roll band and be a...
Well, if that period of time, I realized that I always said, even when I first saw the Rolling Stones, I looked at that and I realized my parents, saw the Beatles first, of course, on TV, and they were outraged, which I loved, the idea that they were outraged. Then when the Rolling Stones came along, they said, you can look like the Beatles, just don't look like the Rolling Stones. I was already way ahead of this. I was saying, wait a minute, if these guys are doing this, if your hair was that long then, and you used props on stage, and you actually used the stage, did the music and everything, did great music, but really produced it. I don't care what you use. You could use a broom, and it would be something that nobody had ever seen before, because nobody had done any theatrics on stage, And the thing was the fact that I think even when I was 16 years old, I was seeing Alice Cooper of what was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to, if we were ever going to stay together long enough to get there, but I saw what it could be.
How'd the other guys feel about this?
Well, they liked the idea. They got to the point, we were in competition with the Doors. When we moved to Los Angeles, the Doors hadn't made it big, but they were a band that was playing the Whiskey and Pandora's Box and all these places. There were 20,000 bands in LA and only 8 slots or 10 slots to play. Love, Paul Butterfield, Buffalo Springfield, these were all bands that were just coming up. And we were in that rank of playing with it. We played with Led Zeppelin at the Whiskey. Alice Cooper did, and only drew 200 people. Which is, I'd love to. I have a slide of that at home,
But maybe you came to see Alice Cooper.
Yeah, right.
How'd you live when you got here?
It's just totally anything. We used to live on like stealing Kool-Aid you know, from the stores, stealing Wheaties and then putting Kool-Aid in. We wouldn't steal the Wheaties, we'd buy the Wheaties. But you could put the Kool-Aid in the Wheaties box if you opened it up. There were lots of little tricks in that.
Did you all live together?
Yeah, we lived all, like, there were 7 guys that lived like in a room about this size.
Your
with
parents
different,
must have gone to
they were
Turkey,
crazy.
or middle class?
Oh yeah, you know, my parents were well off. You know, I mean, they were middle class. So they, you know, and you know, when I left home, it was just like a shock to the system that I was going to go to L.A. and try to make it in a band. You know.
Well, when you came out here and you were playing out, you know, with the Doors or whatever
Yeah.
in that circuit, did you have makeup and you were wearing
Yes.
the funny clothes?
We decided, well, at the beginning, no. We did all Yardbirds material. We did things that nobody else did. We did a lot of experimental kind of things. And people liked us because of the energy. We didn't really, at that point, we were called the Naz then, N-A-Z-Z. Not, Todd Rundgren had a band called Naz also, but we were named after a Yardbird song called The Naz Are Blue. And we came out here and we played all Yardbird stuff. We hadn't written anything original at that point. And we played the Kaleidoscope. Do you remember the Kaleidoscope?
Sure.
At like 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
with a band called Spirits Rebellious, who became Spirit. And they were all jazz then, jazz fusion. They were so far ahead of their time. I mean, even now they would be ahead of their time. You know.
Were you self-managed? Did anybody
Yes,
take
no,
an
just
interest?
us. It was just
Nobody came along?
No, we came. You know, we all went in to get paid. All 5 of us,
Yeah.
anything. You know, and of course, you know, it was like we were living on nothing. You know, we had one guy that was really good looking in the band, and he would, you know, invite a girl over, take her in the bedroom, and then we would go through her purse and take like $5. We wouldn't take anything that was noticeable, just enough, you know. And it was that we weren't like major thieves, but just enough to keep the band. But everything was very band oriented. The band first.
It was a very exciting musical time in Los Angeles.
Oh, it was great.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
It was great. You know.
You guys could meet all other kinds of people. It was
Yeah,
a community almost.
I met the guys from the Doors, and I met you know, the guys from Love and everything. And we really looked up to these guys because they were so, and they liked us. They, you know, they saw what we were doing. They saw the energy involved. The thing that really turned it around was and all the peace and love thing. And we realized that we were not into that at all. You know, that was something that none of us were into. Was love thy neighbor kind of thing. We were more into what was sensational. We were the National Enquirer of rock and roll. You know, we figured, boy born with dog's head. You know, it was much more exciting to us than just stop the war. You know.
Well, had Zappa ever seen you?
He saw us. We finally got an audition. We showed up at his house. He said 7 o'clock. We thought he meant 7 in the morning. We got there at the log cabin at 7 in the morning and set up and started playing. I mean, that's how, we were really stupid at the time. And he came down, and we used to wear our stage clothes was our daily clothes, with chrome pants, you know, and really we had hair and our makeup and everything. That was our street clothes. And he was so, you know, he had never heard anything like this. I mean, the first record, Pretty's For You, was so weird. It was like Devo beyond Devo. It was, you know, it had no sort of like, you couldn't compare it with anything at all. And Zappa liked that. There were like a couple of 2-minute songs that had 40 changes in them, you know. And it was really weird stuff that we had written. You know?
Well, did Zappa produce this record?
He produced the first record, yeah.
Pretty's For You.
Which was just setting up live mics. And we just went and we did the record in 3 days. Pretty's For You was done in 3 days.
What were your impressions of Zappa when you
Well, he was our hero. You know, I mean, Zappa was really our hero. The Mothers at that time, of course, you know, and Frank was the main guy. And I actually knew him, which was something like, you know, knowing the Beatles at that time, as far as I was concerned, knowing Frank Zappa and sitting down and actually talking to him. I mean, none of my friends would ever believe that in Phoenix.
How businesslike was he? Or how sane was he?
He was so straight, but I could tell he was crazy. You know, I mean, he was crazy in a really creative way, but he was so straight that it was shocking. You know, he didn't allow drugs at all. You know, he didn't allow. In fact, we weren't even involved in that. We weren't involved in drugs. We weren't involved. I think I had the first time I ever got drunk. I had 3 Coors beers when I was like 21 years old. And this was like, you know. So all we cared about was getting in front of an audience, anywhere. You know, at Lovin's, you know, at Griffith Park, anywhere.
How outrageous were you at this point? The chickens or snakes or anything like that?
We hadn't gotten to that point yet. We hadn't really gotten to the point of of even being able to afford a chicken. But we realized we finally got a kind of a steady thing at the Cheetah Club as the Naz. We were sort of a opening act there for everybody.
That's before you were Alice Cooper.
Yeah, we were still the Naz. And that's where Shep Gordon saw us. We met Shep at a party over at the Landmark Hotel, which was, everybody lived at the Landmark. Jimi Hendrix, the Jefferson Airplane, the GTOs. Ohio State football team stayed there when they played the Rose Bowl out here and got beat 49-0, I think. The GTOs got a hold of them the night before, I think. But the funny thing was like, we met Shep the night before we were going to sign with Herbie Cohen. Frank Zappa was going to sign us, for his company, for Bizarre Records, we were just elated. Somebody was actually going to sign this band. And we were going to sign with Herbie Cohen. We didn't know anybody else. The night before that happened, I guess, it was just something that had to be. We met Shep Gordon. He had just moved out, and he says, "I'm a manager." Oh, really? And we told him what was going on, and he says, "Okay, I'll be your manager." We said, "Great." And for some reason, I immediately knew that Shep was the guy. He was as outrageous as we were.
What had he done up to then?
He said that he managed the Left Bank, that band, the Left Bank, which I never believed. Maybe he did, I don't know. But he was from New York, and he was so strong, in his rap, that we said, well, great. He says, the first thing you don't want, he says, is a manager that owns the record company to be managing you. He says, that means you have no leverage. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I had no idea what leverage meant. All I cared about was getting on a record. And it was very hard for us because everything that Shep was telling us was taking us a step back. We were saying, well, we don't want to blow this deal, because it's with Frank Zappa of all people, our hero. And he says, just let me talk to him. The next day, of course, we met Herbie. He was ready to sign. We said, oh, here's our manager, and he says, wait a minute. Where did this guy come from? He wasn't here yesterday. We said, well, we met him last night. And of course, Shep is I'm still with Shep after all these years.
Did it go down all right? The deal was made, and
Everything
Frank
was
took
fine.
in the studio?
Yeah, we went in and recorded. And I think what Frank wanted, Frank was trying to sell all the street freaks on one label. He was trying to get all of the real crazy. He had Wildman Fisher, he had the GTOs. And we were much more serious.